Today on Accidental Experts with Bryce Hamilton.
Welcome to the Accidental Experts podcast. I'm your host, Bryce Hamilton. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a child and family therapist. I have been in practice for over 15 years, and I'm also a mom of 4. So I know the challenges both professionally and personally. I'm so glad that you're here today to grow your parenting toolbox. Please come as you are and be ready to learn. My goal is to make you the accidental expert so that you can raise healthy humans. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm so excited to introduce our guest to you today. His name is Luke Kujacznski, and he is a dad of 3, and he's going to download to us all these great ideas, tips, and tricks and suggestions that he has learned over his parenting journey. With that, let's get to Luke.
Thanks for having me.
So we're going to talk about parenting, and this is such a broad topic, but I'm so glad that you're here to chat with us about this because I think you have such a great perspective on life and parenting and just how to navigate the ups and downs of this journey.
Yes. Well, it's I don't know. I feel like you parent long enough, you learn some lessons. We've been in this game for a while. My wife and I started having kids when we were really young, which there are benefits to that, but there's also some risk in that we weren't completely done maturing ourselves. So hopefully through this conversation, I can help parents have a little bit more grace for themselves, help them to know where to go, how to ask for help, and then, connect with their kids better. And honestly, the big thing is learn from them, because that's what kids really help us do.
Yeah, they do so much. Yeah. So this topic of parenting, obviously really complex. And I think being a parent, part of what brought me to even make this podcast was knowing that we have a lot of obligations of things to know. There's just like so much that we need to know in order to feel like we can raise our kids well. So what do you think you have learned in your journey so far as a parent?
That's a big question. I think there was the big thing is, no matter how much you prepare, your kids are going to still find the area that you don't feel you're prepared enough. I think biologically, like, they're kind of wired to kind of push us a little bit. I think our kids can be a catalyst to help us continue to improve our life. So I think for me, the biggest lesson is never stop trying to connect with your kid. It's always going to be work. I tended to think with my oldest, who's now almost 20 and now in college, like, I had a really great relationship with her when she was, 7, 8, 9. We did everything, the fishing trips, the backpacking trips. Like, we were just like 2 birds of a feather. But each milestone age that kid gets to, they're different, and they start to see that world a little differently. And her and I had some bumpy spots and some rocky spots, because I was still thinking we had the connection that we had when she was younger. But now her needs shifted, her needs changed. And that, how do I say it? That means what she needed from me was different. And I wasn't ready for that. So it kind of became this process of not how do I parent, but it turned it into, what does my kid need at this phase of life? And that shift for me changed the dynamic of the relationship. Her and I continue to use her as an example. Coming out of high school, after she graduated, we had this, like, again, we were in our groove, right? Like, we connected, we talked all the time. We talked about, she's a philosophy geek like me, and then she goes off to college. And our relationship shifted again, and it caught me by surprise. I thought because she was an adult now that it was going to be different. And so I think as parents, there are some tips and tricks that make things easier. But I think there also has to just be this awareness that these kids are going to change. and they're going to invite us to change along with them. And it's really hard to remember that when you're in the midst of that parenting journey, that things change, they change. And so for me, this takeaway is just be open to change and focus on connecting with your kid front and center.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, because I do think, I mean, we're changing every day. Our kids are changing
Right.
every day, but especially when they're going through new big milestones, what they need from us is changing.
Right.
So that's great to think
Yep.
about, because yeah, they still, might need us to be silly with them or playful, but sometimes they might need more serious or more advice
Right.
or less advice, or, it does change, and we have to
Right. They want to be pushed. They need to be pushed at certain times. Other times they don't need to. They need to figure it out.
Yeah.
And so and it can change throughout a given school year. That's the thing that got me. It wasn't like, okay, 6th grade, we're good. There's big changes in 6th grade, and so that, it's a journey for sure.
Yeah. It's almost like being aware that there's change coming, right? Like,
Yes.
when I watched Game of Thrones, they're like, winter's coming, right? Like that idea where it's like there's a change coming, right? You just have to be looking for it. And so maybe that's what our pulse is also on, is just like noticing, how are we evolving? How are we changing?
Yes. And I think, I had this in a past life. I worked for a nonprofit and we did a lot of community organizing. And I don't remember who told me this, but a revolution is just condensed evolution. And so, with kids, if we're staying soft on the edge of looking for how they're signaling to us that they want us to be a little bit different, that change is more manageable.
Yes.
I wasn't that. That wasn't me. It is now, but it wasn't in the past. And so we're like, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. Holy crap, what happened? All this stuff is out of my control. And we did this, 4 years of change work in a month. Nobody slept. There was a lot of pain. And so there's just this, you're aware that you need to change and you need to learn. And the kids are changing and learning too. I think you have a better opportunity to avoid some of those big crisis moments.
Yeah.
And prevent those because you're staying soft.
Yeah. It's funny, that makes me think of, so my husband and I do conversation cards. We like to play pool, and we'll do conversation cards while we're doing that. And so I have like so many decks of them. And so I brought out this deck that we had done several years ago, and he was like, I think we already did this. And I was like, yeah, but like we've evolved, like we've changed in a couple of years. And he was like, okay. And we're answering it. And there were several times that he answered a question where I was like, that is not what I was expecting from you. Like, I like, you haven't told me that story, or I didn't expect that to be your answer. And so I think even as adults, we're changing too. So like, kids haven't even figured out who they are yet. I don't know that I figured out who I am at 40, but I'm working on it.
Process. Right. Yeah. It's a daily process. And that's, you bring up a great point in, your relationship with your husband. And then I would extend that even to our relationships with ourselves, right? Is like, you encountered me on LinkedIn. Like, I'm not shy about saying like therapy is really, really, really good. Right. And in doing your own work, right? Because we are changing. I'm changing all the time. My wife's changing all the time. Our relationship's evolving. And in a spousal relationship, you're going to find those different areas where there's friction, and you're going to tend to kind of like work through those and become better, ideally. Your kids are going to find whatever gap that you haven't explored about yourself, that you're insecure about. They are going to find that. So being prepared and really making sure that you and your spouse are like on the same page with a strategy of how you interact, that you communicate well, that you have a rhythm to how you do self-work, and whether that's, through different groups, or if you want to go to therapy, or you like to read. But like, I was shocked how much my kids highlighted that. And from my oldest to my youngest is 9. And I'm doing things a little bit different, and he still pushes my buttons. I'm like, I just thought I filed all those off that I don't have anymore. And you just do it. So everybody's changing. And I think if we realize that and we understand that, we might have a little bit more grace for our interactions with our kids, for what we expect of them, but also like what we expect of ourselves, and grace for ourselves. Because I made mistakes. I made a lot of mistakes. My wife would be the first, like, she made mistakes. And when you think about it, that we're all changing all the time, it's not a static, here's a formula for how to be the best parent or the best human.
Yeah.
Everybody's writing the book.
Yeah, literally as you're doing it.
As
right?
you're doing it.
Yes. It's the hardest way to do it, but it's the only way that I found. I mean, I was once asked, like, what's my favorite parenting book? And I was like, I don't have one, because I don't think that any one applies to every kid I have, right? Or every kid that I've seen in my practice. There are parts of books that I love, right? But it's like a book. It's hard for me to give a recommendation, because everybody's so different, and every situation is so different. And yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, I mean, we did tons of parenting classes when our kids were little and when they're older, and the stuff that worked great with the first kid doesn't work at all for the second kid.
Yeah.
And then the third kid,
there has to be some magic to this, right? Like, there's a reason why they're all different, and we're all still learning. Yeah.
Right. That one of my favorite books of all time that I never recommend, but I tell everybody about. It's called Broken Open by Elizabeth Lesser. And she said, kids will produce more dark night of the soul events for you than you care to imagine. And that Phoenix process, that dark night of the soul process, in her belief, is kind of one of the unsung benefits of having kids. Because they are going to push. They are going to push you. But before they do that, they're going to invite you to change with them. And I think that's like, if you can get to that magic of like, yeah, they're pushing me to explore some things, but also look at, I'm not an art person. My oldest 2 girls, they can draw like crazy stuff. I have pictures from all of, like, do art with me, Dad. I can't draw. But that doesn't mean I can't. Like, that's an invitation for me to connect with them as they're changing. And so I just think if we can see the beauty in that, there's a lot of magic in there with kids.
Yeah. Well, and I think I like that idea of like these invitations that kids give us, right? They're constantly asking us to do things with them. Do this with me, do that with me. And, I try to take my kids up on that, but I am not always perfect at that, because, there's other stuff I've got to do. Dinner has to be made, right? Like, bedtimes have to be had, and there's different things, but it's also like, I've been trying to say like, okay, I can't do that today, but could I do that this weekend? Right? Could we plan a time to do that, so that we don't have to do it in this moment? Because sometimes I just can't. I just can't. And even if I want to, I can't. And sometimes I'm like, when I say that, I'm like, can I really not? Like, couldn't we eat chicken nuggets for dinner? Right? Like, it would not kill us to do that.
Right.
But I choose not to in those moments, but I do want my kids to know that they're important, and what they want me to be involved in their life is also important. And so to take them up on that opportunity as much as I can. I have jumped more on the trampoline in the years that I've had kids than I think I did as a kid.
Yeah. And I'm curious if you find this, like, when somebody asks me to do something, being an adult, I think of the right way to do it or like how much time it's going to take. But sometimes, like, especially when they're little, their interest is like, you have 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You have 5 minutes. And so like, how do you, like, to your point, say, maybe I can't do it today, or like, can we do this for 5 minutes? And like what you're communicating to them a little bit in those moments is, I have stuff I want to do, but you are more important than the stuff I have to do. And we can communicate it in a way where they start to understand their value in our eyes, which I think is one of those like key jobs as a parent, is that your kid understands that they have inherent value to you. It's not based on what they're doing or their grades or this team or that team. It's and it's hard because we all have jobs, especially like I work from home. And so my son is like, hey, it's summertime, dad's home. Like, can we go play catch at 2:00 in the afternoon? I started using this language that I really want to play catch with you right now. I have responsibilities that I have to do. Is it okay if I finish up this meeting and then we play catch? And he's like, sure.
Yeah.
And you, through that communication, right, I'm affirming that his desire isn't bad. I'm affirming that I want to be there with him. And also I have adult responsibilities, but at the first chance that I get, I'm going to be there. It just helps them get better at asking for what they need, which is something that we all could get better at. I know for me, I'm not the best at it, but he's teaching me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome to make sure that he understands that he's valuable and that you want to do that. And, you know, you have to balance the things because we also are trying to raise humans, right? Like at some point, he's going to also have other obligations and have to balance. And so if we're giving that model, then that helps them to kind of follow our lead. So what do you think parents can do to make their responsibility as parents easier? Is there anything that you think that parents can do to make this whole parenting gig simpler?
I think a couple things. That's a big question, and it's a loaded question. I'm not an expert. I have parented for over 20 years. That's
They say after 10 years you're an expert. So
okay.
There you go.
Help kids understand where the lines are and what the expectations are early. It gets really hard when you get 10 or 11 years old and you're like, okay, now you need to do chores. Like, I've never done chores. And so like, well, it's part of what our family values. And so I would probably start with, what are our family values? Like, you have them. If you don't, there's a lot of resources on there. Like, this is what our values are. We operate with integrity. We look out for other people, you know, family first, and, you know, operate with kindness, right? Like, that's just an example. So they have that framework, and then use that framework to say, okay, everybody does chores. Everybody contributes to the house. Let's start early. Maybe you can only unload the silverware in the silverware drawer from the dishwasher. But you're building some of those habits earlier with the kids to help them. And then you're setting the expectation that it takes work to run a house. And it takes that sort of thing. So you're starting to put some like lines for them. Like, you don't want, and in my experience, we've done multiple different ways, like no lines, just kind of like, yep, you can have a phone. Yes, your friends are getting social media. We think it's too early, but you want to do it. And with some kids that works, but with most of the kids, they want something to push against a little bit. And so if you can help draw those lines of just small expectations, let them know that they can contribute. To me, that was one of the things that really helped with our kids, of have some lines, have some consequences. And on the consequences thing, learning consequences while they're at home. And this might apply more to as they starting to get a little bit older. If you don't want to do the chores, that's okay, but there's going to be no TV.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard to enforce that stuff. But the next day when they're like, hey, I really want to watch TV, you're like, you didn't do chores. And then you're allowing that boundary or that rule to take the brunt of it, as opposed to something being aimed at you.
Mm-hmm.
For me. So that type of stuff was really important. I think when they're in that middle age, I think one of the things, my biggest regrets as a parent, is I didn't understand what happens in kids' brains at different milestones.
Mm-hmm.
I really didn't. I read Lisa D'Amour, I believe it's her name.
She has the teenage books, the girl books. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And when my oldest daughter was going through a pretty significant mental health crisis during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what's developmentally appropriate versus what's a risky behavior that I need to look out for?
Yeah.
Because I feel like I was looking at things and I was deeming them really risky and dangerous when they were developmentally appropriate for her.
Mm-hmm.
And there was danger signals that I wasn't seeing because I didn't understand what happens in their brains as they develop.
Yeah.
So I think the rules and the boundaries with the kids and values is important, but if you had just one thing, understand a couple milestones, what happens in that 5 to 7 range.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're showing us that, like, I think it's between actually 4 and 8, anxiety, depression, OCD, all those things, that is where they kind of develop in a kid's brain in that time frame. If I had known that, I would have been like, okay, like we need the low stress environment. We need to make sure that they're nurtured, that they're safe, all these different things. Not that we didn't do it, but I would be more aware of that importance of that time frame.
Yeah.
Or then when they start to hit puberty, their prefrontal cortex almost completely detaches from the rest of their brain so it can develop. So your very logical 12-year-old turns into an illogical 13-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, I remember seeing this. I'm like, what happened to my kid that was just orderly and had systems and could think through things? She can't anymore.
Mm-hmm.
What did I do wrong? What happened? I didn't do anything wrong. It's just her brain developing. And so for me, that was a huge piece that's helped with our other kids. And then every chance I get, I say, understand those milestones. Understand, even just if you just understand at certain places, your brains change and you need to slow down and pay attention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it helps you to kind of be prepared a little bit,
Right.
right? If you know what's coming, then it's easier to look for, right?
Exactly.
So it's like if your kid has had an ear infection before and you know what the signs or symptoms are for that particular kid, because some kids don't have the same symptoms. Some of them don't have a fever. Some of them don't pull on their ear, or some of them aren't crabby but have a fever, right? And if you know what that is, then you can find it, right? You're like, oh, I think this is an ear infection again. And then you're able to get care, right? So if you know what developmental milestones are going to happen, it helps you to be like, oh yes, okay, we're doing exactly what we're supposed to be doing, right? Like even though this is hard, there's a reason why this is here, why we're going through this stage, so that they can develop these skills. And like independence is such an important thing, like in those toddler years. Oh my gosh, it's so frustrating, right? When they learn the word no and you're like, you're using no against me. Like, how dare you? Like I do everything for you and you're telling me no. But we want our kids to be egocentric and say like, I don't want that thing, because we need them to know that they're a person in themselves.
Right.
And they have, yes, exactly. So that they can make decisions, because one day they're not going to live with us anymore, right? Like we have to raise them. And so there's a whole process through your entire childhood that you're going through to get that. Even as adults, we're still going through developmental processes. So I think, it's important for us to remember that it's normal, right? It doesn't mean we love it, but also to like meet it with kindness and compassion, to like understand what it's like for them. Because I know that when my 8-year-old gets a little sassy, I'm like, this isn't really like her, right? Like
Right.
what's going on? And we kind of talk about it, and she's like, well, I just don't really feel heard. And I'm like, okay, tell me, like, what does
Yeah.
that feel like? Like, what would be being heard feel like for you? Or when are you not feeling heard? And then she'll say whatever it is, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, that totally makes sense. Or sometimes I'm like, oh, okay, well, I see that like this. Could you see that too? Or how could we come together on this?
Yes. That's such a gift that you have that, right? That she's able to say, I'm not feeling heard. I'm not like seen. I think has agency. You've created a space where she has that agency. Some kids are just going to also step up and take that agency. Other kids, you
Sure.
have to foster that agency.
Mm-hmm.
But you bring up something I'm curious about. Like, how did she develop that language? Is that stuff she would have heard around the house? You saying, is that something that you taught? Because I know different kids, I'll speak for my youngest, my son, he has a hard time coming up with the word of what he's feeling.
Sure. So I think probably it's something that we have taught a lot in our household. Like I'm all about the feelings, right? Like we read the feelings books when they're really little. We talk about feelings. My 2-year-old will say, like, you make me so mad. Like, and he'll even tell me, you're the worst mommy ever. And then he'll be like, but you're the best soup maker. I love you. I'm like, I know this is all so confusing. I'm confused too. But I think it's all about us. I don't take very many things personally. And I try to reflect back, like you're telling me you're really upset right now.
Right.
And so I think probably how that happened is through words of like, I'm really mad at you right now. And I might have said, I wonder if you're not feeling heard. Like, do
Yeah.
you feel like I don't understand what you're saying? And then I think that's probably where it came from, is me giving some modeling of words that she could use to tell me how
Yes.
she's feeling. And I think everybody does their own kind of way, but we have some good feelings going on, some big feelings for sure.
Yeah.
We are definitely not, the feelings are still real in our house. We still have all of them, even though they have a therapist mom. They're still big, but at least we're hearing the words, because I'd rather them tell me the feelings
Yes.
than the behaviors, because it's harder to code a behavior
Right.
than it is to, I'll be like, can you put words to that? But my kids also have had years of coaching in what feelings are. Like my 2-year-old told me he was crying going to school this year. He started preschool, and he was like, I don't want to go to school. And I was like, you don't want to go to school? Like, you've been talking about going to school like for a while, like all summer you've been like, I'm going to go to school, and you were so excited. And he was like, I'm embarrassed. And I was like, dang, the
Yeah.
2-year-old just told me he's embarrassed. Like, and I was like, he was like, I'm feeling shy, and like the kids are looking at me. And I was like, and he's using this appropriately. And I'm like, this is impressive. There's there's some
That had to be a
emotions going on
proud
in our
mom
house.
moment there.
Yes, I was like, yes, we did it. And I was like, okay, like, how do we get through this? Right? Like, everybody feels embarrassed sometimes. And like, I don't like a lot of people looking at me. I wonder, like, could we make a plan? Right. And so we talked to his teacher, and that's how we solved that. And we've had some tear-free days it's only been like 2 weeks that we've been tear-free though. And we started
Yeah.
school several months ago. So he definitely cried at school longer than any of my other kids. So it's kind of, as a parent and therapist, I was like, okay, what am I not doing right? What am I not getting here? Like, where are we missing something? Because I don't want him to struggle in this, but I know he can also do hard things. So like, we can't not go to school. We
Right.
have to face the anxiety, but like, I don't want it to be super hard. Is there a way that this could be an easier transition? And he picked a teacher that he wanted to go to, and now he'll go to either teacher. So so we've kind of overcome that hurdle.
Yeah, that's I mean, that training component of like helping them learn the words and the language to really, I mean, ultimately communicate what they're feeling, I think is one of the best things we can do as parents, even if it's not perfect. That's going to help us establish and keep that communication path with our kids.
Yeah.
As they get older, right? Because you're geek out here a little bit, but you're building neural pathways.
Yeah.
right? And so I always say, like, if you practice that stuff when they're younger, when they get older, you're not trying to like create a new pathway with a 14-year-old. I did that.
Mhm.
It's horrible. It's so hard.
Yeah.
But you have these young kids that are like, I'll tell you how I feel. And you're like, I want to hear how you feel. And you're like, let's
Mhm.
talk about that and let's problem solve that together. You're turning a path into like a road, that information. And even if it gets neglected, that's still there. So when they know that they're struggling, they know, like, I can use this language with mom or dad, and it's going to stop them, and they're going to sit down and we can talk through this, and there is a way
Mhm.
out,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So powerful.
Yeah.
Hold
And
on.
thank you. I think one of the other things too is parents communicating their feelings too, right?
Yes.
So like I say to my kids, I'm really frustrated right now. Like I've asked you to get your shoes on and you have not done that. Like I can feel myself getting upset.
Yep.
So I think, it's that language, or we're at the grocery store and I'm like, they don't have any broccoli. I'm super disappointed or whatever. Even like those things may be going in my head, but I say it out loud.
Right. Yep. And I think that's like one of the things that, as part of my mental health journey, I chose to like struggle like in front of my kids.
Mm-hmm.
Not like in a like too much like oversharing, but remember last winter I had a rough couple years, and then I had a really rough, hard month on a whole bunch of different levels. And um I wasn't in the best space. And I remember sitting down, like my son and I were gonna watch the Super Bowl. My wife was at work, and like I was texting my therapist, and I couldn't stop crying.
Mm-hmm.
Just like feeling this weight, and like depressive episodes are so rough because you don't feel like it's gonna ever get over. And my son was sitting right next to me. I could have run into another room and been like, I don't want him to see this, but it's like,
Mm-hmm.
it actually helped pull me out. He's like, what's wrong, Dad? I'm like, you know how sometimes you're sad and it's like hard. I'm like, I'm really, really sad right now, and I have a hard time really explaining it, but I'm going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And this is okay to feel this. And I think if you start that younger, where they're used to you seeing their emotions, that you're human, I think it makes it easier for them to ask for that assistance or not be afraid. Um, I kind of joke, it's sad, but it's also a joke. Like I grew up in a house that there was like 3 emotions: happy, sad, and angry.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them was a sin. So like as an adult, like I remember the first time I saw a feelings wheel, I was like 35.
Yeah. I bet that was shocking. You're like,
You're like,
whoa.
whoa, you're like, actually all of this centers from like 6 core emotions or 4 core, like you can get out in there. You're like, you can act, and like then when you do work on this, it was like, but helping kids to understand that there's words to describe these different feelings, and when they
Mm-hmm.
talk about it, most of the time it helps them feel better.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
it.
It just at least brings some awareness to where they're at, right? Even if it doesn't solve that. But we do start going through a process of coping with it by
Mm-hmm.
talking about what is
Yep.
going on. Yeah.
Yes.
So I think, parents being able to talk about their emotions, being able to be vulnerable, right? Within reason, obviously not oversharing, but also giving their kids suggestions. Maybe it's looking at a feelings wheel. I love the
Right.
feelings, like little characters that they draw with the different feelings faces, and kids
Mm-hmm.
make me laugh about, like, they'll be like, oh my gosh, this one's ridiculous. And I'm
Right.
like, is it really ridiculous? You could be love struck. They're like, ugh, gross. No, never. That would never happen. And they're like,
Yeah.
have you been love struck? I'm like, yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Totally has happened. So I think just giving them that feeling that like all of these emotions are fine. All of them are
Right.
great. Feelings are good.
Right.
And we don't have to push them away. That actually hurts us more by pushing them down or away from us, but to allow ourselves to feel them, although it's uncomfortable, we do actually start to metabolize them that way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we do. And it's just a powerful, feelings aren't bad. And that's what, like, I mean, I love the Inside Out movies, helping to raise that up. I don't know if you've heard of a company called Slumberkins that does, like, I mean, real young books about different emotions.
No, I
And
haven't. I'll have to look it up.
it's a really cool, just normalize it. It's like
Yeah.
feelings aren't who we are. It's something that we're feeling. And I like, you said metabolize it, but I love that idea of we have to like work our way through it. Like, want to feel it. It's telling you something. You should pay attention to that. And that process is going to make that feeling go away.
Yeah. Yeah, no feeling lasts forever. I think in the midst of it, we all feel like it's going to stay this way. But the truth is, no feeling so far in my life, I'm 40, has ever lasted forever.
Nope, never.
Right. And normally it's shorter lived than we think. I think the worst of the feeling is like 90 seconds. Right. But sometimes we can amplify that by continuing to focus on that piece.
Sure.
Right. And to amplify that. But yeah, feelings are good, but hard. And so I think if you grew up in a home that did not talk about feelings, then it's a very big step to move towards talking about feelings. And you can also say to your kids, like, I'm not really good at this yet. Like, will you do this with me? Right. And you guys are growing together. So again, with that aligning with your kid of like, you don't have to be an expert at this. And I tell my kids, like, I'm just one mommy. I don't know. Or like, I'll have to look that up. And my kids will sometimes give me a hard time. Like, you don't know how to do that. Like teasing me because I do know a lot of things. Right. But I'm like, nope, not yet. Right. But I'm going to find out. And so then normally we do that together. I'll be like, okay, let's read this, right? What does this say? Or we have a coyote that is visiting our backyard. And so my daughter brought home a library book about coyotes. And so I love that because now I know so much about coyotes that I didn't know. And I wish the coyote would just go away, but they didn't tell me how to make coyotes magically go away in the book, unfortunately.
And I think I mean, that's a great example. Like, I think when I was younger, I like, and early on, the parent, like, we can do a perfect job with this. There is a perfect parenting, and I can be perfect, and I can be this figure to them, right? And like, I want to tell parents, like, you are that. Like, they look up to you so much, and they're not needing you to be an expert in everything.
Yeah.
They're needing you to be present with them in that moment of their curiosity or their anger or their fear or their embarrassment or whatever it is, or their coyote, what's a coyote? Or my son got really into tractors. I know more about tractors. I grew up on a farm. We grew up around tractors, and I learned, like, let's explore this together. This is really cool. Like, that, being in that moment, this is so cool. And I remember those experiences. My oldest was earthworms. Like, she went down this earthworm thing. We had so many earthworm books.
Yes, that's amazing. Yeah, we're growing too.
Right. Like, and it's like, I could pretend that I have all the answers, but they're gonna they're gonna know that you don't. Even at a very young age, my son would be like, Dad, if I made something up, he'd be like, Dad. Like, so just learn with them and enjoy it, and don't feel that pressure to be perfect.
Yeah. I think, yeah, what you're saying is it doesn't undercut your authority, your role, your place in their life to not know everything, because no one knows everything. No one, right? Even the billionaires who make so much money off of something are really good at probably one or two things. And so I think thinking about that part of, like, as a parent, like, I will say to my kids sometimes, like, this is my first day parenting you on this day. Right. Like, I've never parented you today before. So like, I'm still figuring out how to do this. And so like, I need your help sometimes, or, like, this isn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. So like, let's figure out what we need to do differently, or, like, bringing them alongside us.
For sure. For sure. It's great.
So where do you think parents go awry? Like, where do you think we go astray from this job?
That's a big question. I think one of the things is, like, that I've heard a lot is, well, I have a great relationship with my kid now. Like, assuming that what you have today is going to maintain and stay the same. your thing, I have never parented you today.
Mm-hmm.
Like I am not on today is great language because it's a constant struggle. So that would be point one. Point two is sometimes you can feel like with all you do for the kids, right? Like I drive you to practice, I pay for travel ball fees, like I feed you, like do this. You owe me something. I deserve, as a parent, I deserve respect. Kids don't owe us anything. It's us who owe them things. And so I think getting in that mindset of like, I do all this stuff, like most of the times when I've got the most frustrated with my kids or like getting like angry, it's when I'm like, I did this, and you should reciprocate this. It takes me back to like different types of leaders, right? You can be a leader because somebody gave you a title and you can use power and authority to get what you want. But that doesn't mean you have influence. That doesn't mean people want to follow you. And so parents, like we have to like earn the right to influence our kids. And it starts with understanding that they don't owe us anything. And so I think parents that go astray, it's like, well, I do all this stuff, so they should take care of these things. Now, that's not saying we don't have expectations for our kids of this is part of the house. These are the rules. But that, I don't know if I am making that sense. They don't owe us respect. And there's times when like I've been called out by all of my kids and it's never fun. But they're almost always right. And so I think, and that gets back to that whole circle of parents doing their own work and not projecting onto their kids. I think the third thing that I've seen that I know I've struggled with is having your kids live the life that you wish you'd lived. I love sports. I still love sports. My oldest two girls, they both played softball. My oldest daughter, she was really, really good. She didn't like it, but I pushed her. So I'm like, you could be good at this. Like I wanted to be the parent that I didn't have growing up, that didn't like cheer me on and help me stay in a sport or help me stay in that thing. I'm going to be what I didn't have for her. And she needed what I didn't have for her, but it wasn't around sports. It wasn't around living what I didn't get to do. It was that level of I'm there for you and whatever you get excited about. And so you see that a lot of parents almost living vicariously through their kids. And that's a lot of responsibility to put on a kid. And it's still not going to fill up that gap that you have as a parent of that life that you didn't live. It's still going to be empty. They'll win the state championship and you're like, oh, I could have won the state championship. But you didn't, right? Like, so like, how do we do that work and not, and I think when you sit back and then you don't push it and you like what you like as a parent, because you're allowed to like things, and you're allowed to like things that your kids don't like. But if you remove some of that pressure that they have to be, it's funny how often some of your kids in different forms and fashions are going to find the hobbies or the activities that were important to you. They're going to come back because you're not forcing it.
Yeah, for sure.
That was a lot.
No, those are all really good points. I think, we're all trying to do our best, and sometimes we want to give our kids things we didn't have. And so then we push them into something because we wish we would have been pushed, but really it's us that still wanted to be pushed, right? And so like we've got to do that work on ourselves. So I think that's such a great point of like, it's like the wrong formula. It just doesn't matter. Your kid is a different formula than you. So if you try to take that formula and fill the void, it's not going to work. It's going to seep out
Backfire.
or whatever. Yeah, it's not going to work the way that you hoped.
No.
Yeah.
It's gonna result in a lot of tears.
Yes. Yes, on both sides, probably.
Yep. Both
Okay,
sides.
so where do you think gratitude plays into parenting?
I think gratitude plays into parenting. Man, I think it's really, really important. I think it changes based on like what age that kid is, and how old you are. I know sometimes when they're young and they demand so much of you,
Mm-hmm.
but you always get through the day, right? And gratitude is like, baby's asleep, I get a half an hour, I did a good job, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's that.
Mm-hmm.
I think as I've gotten older, watching my kids live values that we've talked to them about, like, helps me appreciate like how much we've done together and feel grateful for that opportunity to influence on their life, right? And so I think it can change a little bit. For me, currently where I'm at with gratitude is I would not be the human I am today without the influence of all my kids.
Yeah.
I really want it. Each one of them, I can point to very specific things where they like just destroyed this block that I had in my life, or in how I saw the world, or how I approached different things. And being on the side of parents, with my youngest being 9 and having them all the way into college, it's a different view, right? Like my world's a little bit calmer than when we had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old running around.
Sure.
But like when I see that, I mean, it happened yesterday, I think it was. My oldest, who's up at college, she's 10 hours away. We have a fabulously fun relationship now. She calls me when she's stuck. And she was telling me the other day, she said, my boyfriend says, like, if I'm having a hard time, she's like, why don't you call your dad? And like in that moment, I'm grateful that she still allows me to influence her life. Right? Like my middle daughter is such a phenomenal artist and so cool in so many ways. I don't know how it happened, but she has no problem asking very specifically what she needs. I need more art pencils. Dad, will you buy me this? Hey, I'm going out with friends. Can I have $5? Like, and I'm just like thinking about how hard that skill was for me to develop, of just asking something from somebody. And then my little guy, we're walking out to the bus this morning. We get out, it's like Michigan, it's nasty weather all the time this time of year. It's like, do you want to play catch for 5 minutes before the bus comes? Yes, I do. Right? Like he wants to be with me.
Yeah. Like,
so it depending on the kid, and it's just like, I think we find gratefulness when we're looking for it. And it's something that I all my kids have done in spurts. I still try to do. It's like, and it's a great reminder to bring it back up with my son. We were doing it before we go to bed. I'd be like, what are 2 things that you're grateful for? Being grateful is a practice that you have to foster. And if you're, as a parent, looking for those, like, wow, did you see that? Like, she went to the bathroom by herself. Or did you see that? Like, he cleared his own plate. Like, those are moments to be like, I am being heard. I am grateful for the opportunity to, like, I am doing something a little right. So that's how I see gratefulness.
Yeah. Well, and it is hard because sometimes they challenge us so much. I think, the times that are hardest for me as a parent is like the sleepless nights where I am exhausted and the baby or the toddler or the child needs
Right.
some type of comfort, right? And I'm so tired. But somebody once said, about their own kid. They're like, but I think about the fact that they picked me to be their parent. I was chosen to be their parent. And so like in those moments, I'm like, he's like, my toddler's calling for me. My daughters are calling for me, right? Like it's me that they want.
Right.
And so just being thankful for that in those moments,
Mhm.
because like I could also be super pissed and be like, go to sleep. It doesn't work.
Right.
I mean,
It doesn't work.
it doesn't work.
No, I've tried it. I've tried it. Doesn't
Yeah,
work.
it doesn't work. But in those moments, you're just like, I want to sleep, so I need you to sleep. But just being like, I'm just thankful, right? Because if they'll call me now and continue to foster this, they'll call me later, right? Like they're going to continue this as long as I keep this relationship going and this line of communication open. And they know that when they call me, I come,
Mhm.
then we'll continue to coexist in this place of continuing to foster a relationship together.
Yes. 100%. Well said. Love it.
Thank you. Okay, so if you could talk to kids about parenting, I'm so excited to hear what you're going to say, because I don't even know what I would say to this question, but I liked this question when I came up with it, thinking about like, what would you tell kids about parenting? What do you think they need to know?
I think they need to know that this is a hard question. I can go a couple different ways. What's coming to my mind is they're really trying to give you what they didn't have.
Mm-hmm.
And that might not be what you exactly need, but most of the time, they're giving you something they didn't have. I interviewed a bunch of dads over the summer, and I'd asked this question. I said, what is one thing that you want your kids to have, that you want to give your kids, that just feels like at a gut level, like I have to do this? And one dad said, quality time. And I said, how many days a year was your dad on the road growing up? He's like 300.
Wow.
Another said, unconditional love.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so your dad and his parents didn't get along and they didn't understand him. And he goes, right. So like there is this process as parents that are healing. We start to give kids what we didn't have.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wanted an enthusiastic sports parent. And so that's what I started out. And so I think kids get frustrated with that. Like, well, dad's not doing this, but like, what was dad's childhood like? And what is he trying to make better for you that he didn't have? What was mom's childhood like? And how did she feel missed? And she's trying to make sure you don't do that. So I think that's like helping kids even at a young age, right? Like maybe you didn't have shoes that fit. And so your parent gets really excited when you get shoes. Like, why did mom care so much about shoes? Mom was always embarrassed about the shoes she had when she was a kid, and she has the opportunity to make sure you have good shoes, and she is going to do that. And that's her, it's in some ways it's her healing, right? As she's fixing that. So I think helping kids understand that parents are really, they're really trying, but they're not perfect, and we're still growing and healing too.
Yeah. Grace, just giving some space. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I think that's, because I mean, my dad was a doctor. Like when I was 7, when he graduated medical school, he worked all the time. I was like, wow, that's horrible. He wasn't around. Like his dad left him and his 3 siblings and his mom when they were 14. They had no economic stability in their life at all.
Mm-hmm.
So he gave it to us.
Yeah. For sure.
So I think that's, as kids get older, I think it's easier to have that conversation, but my 9-year-old understands that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think kids want to know about our childhoods too, right? They're curious about that, especially when they're younger. My kids ask me questions like, did you have this kind of a tradition? We have every Friday night is movie night at our house. And my kids are like, did you do that when you were growing up? And I'm like, no, we totally didn't. I mean, like we spent time together, but we didn't have like movie night is Friday night kind of deal. And so they want to know, right? And I think by talking about those experiences, it kind of sets the framework to kind of talk about where your parents did really well and where they kind of missed the mark, right? Or where you wish that your parents would have showed up more. And also provides an opportunity for your kids to tell you where they want you to show up more.
Yes, that, right? They'll tell us.
Yeah.
We just have to listen.
Yeah. And providing that opportunity for sure. Yeah. Okay. So what do you want parents to take away from this conversation? We have had such a fantastic conversation. Like we've downloaded so many things. What do you want them to take away?
Oh man, have grace for yourself, please. Have grace for yourself and take care of yourself. Like you can't pour out of an empty glass. Like lean into that work and however that makes sense for you and your family and your traditions, but like do that and have grace for yourself. It's number one. Number two, the goal is to connect with your kid. I have like done more random things to connect with my kids than I ever thought I would, but like we're there, connect. They don't owe you anything. So I think like showing up every day, like trying to be the best parent and earning that respect and that privilege to speak in your life has been a really helpful framework for me with my kids. Fourth one, I'm only going to go to 5. Fourth one, understand their brains. What are those milestones? And I don't, for the teenage books, Lisa's books are fantastic. I don't have any for the younger generation, but maybe we could look some up, but that for younger age groups.
Yeah, I'll put some in the show notes.
I think that's a big one. And then I think the third one is, the fifth one is, and we didn't talk about this, but don't sleep on emotional regulation. I didn't discover that until in my current role. My son and I, my wife, everybody in our family now has something that they can do when they feel themselves getting in a flight, fight, or freeze moment to help settle down. It's a great way to diffuse tension. My son likes box breathing. It's his thing. It helps him calm down. We're getting ready to go someplace and he's feeling really excited. He's kind of bouncing off the walls. Hey, do you think maybe it'd be helped by doing some breathing? And even for me, I do that. Like before this call, I hopped on. Like I'm going to do some regulation. I'm going to make sure that my body is relaxed and I'm able to listen. So that learning emotional regulation a little bit to me has been a huge gift, and it's a way to decrease tension in a conflict without talking about the conflict of just like, hey, let's practice good care. So that'd be the list.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Luke, for being here today. This was an awesome conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. It was absolutely wonderful to be here, and I feel like we could have talked for another 3 hours. Not that anybody would have listened, but we could have talked, right?
Yes, we'll have to have you come back and talk about another topic.
For sure.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks again, Luke. You were a fantastic guest. We're so glad that you were here today. I don't know about you, but there's so many things that Luke said that really resonated with me. I hope that you're taking away some nuggets of good information to incorporate into your parenting journey as well. With that, I will say thank you so much for your time today. Please like and subscribe to our show. Give us a rating. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. And also keep the emails coming to accidentalexperts@gmail.com with topic suggestions for future shows. Have a fantastic day. Some words from our legal team.
The information presented in this podcast is not intended or implied to be a substitute for appropriate professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. All content, including text, graphics, images, and information contained on or available through this podcast, is for general information purposes only This podcast makes no representations and assumes no responsibility for the accuracy or information on or available through this podcast, and such information is subject to change without notice. You are encouraged to confirm any information obtained through this program with other sources and review all information regarding any condition or treatment with the appropriate professionals.
What we're saying is, yes, I am a real therapist, but I'm not your therapist.